Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Now we talk about American agriculture and its changing significance. From nation's earliest days, farming has held a crucial place in American economy and culture. Farmers play an important role in any society, of course, since they feed people. But farming has been particularly valued in the United States. Early in the nation's life, farmers were seen as exemplifying economic virtues such as hard work, innovative, and self-sufficient. Moreover, many Americans, particularly immigrants who may have never held any land and did not have ownership over their own labor or product, found that owning a farm was a ticket into the American economic system. Anyway, people who moved out of farming often used land as a commodity that could easily be bought and sold, opening another avenue for profit. The American farmer has generally been quite successful at producing food. Indeed, sometimes his success has created his biggest problem. The agriculture sector has suffered periodic bouts of overproduction that have depressed prices. Following periods, government helped smooth out the worst of these episodes, but in recent years such assistance has declined, reflecting government's desire to cut its own spending as well as the farm sector's reduced political influence. American farmers owe the ability to produce large yields to a number of factors. For one thing, they work under extremely favorable natural conditions. The American Midwest has some of the richest soil in the world. Rainfall is modest to abundant over most areas of the country. Large capital investment and increasing use of highly trained labor also have contributed to the success of American agriculture. It's not unusual to see today farmers driving tractors with air-conditioned cabs attached to very expensive fast-moving plows, tillers, and harvesters. Biotechnology has led to the development of seeds that are disease and drought resistant. Fertilizers and pesticides are commonly used, according to some environmentalists. Computers track farm operations, and even space technology is utilized to find the best places to plant and fertilize crops. What's more, researchers periodically introduce new food, new products, and methods of breeding them, such as artificial ponds to raise fish. Farmers have not repealed some of the fundamental laws of nature, however, they still must contend with forces beyond their control, most notably the weather. Despite it generally being benign weather, North America also experiences frequent floods and droughts. Changes in the weather give architecture its own economic cycles, often unrelated to the general economy. Calls for government assistance come when factors work against the farmer's success, at times when different factors converge to push farms over the edge into failure. Pleas for help are particularly intense. In the 1930s, for instance, overproduction, bad weather, and the Great Depression combined to provide what they seemed like insurmountable odds to many American farmers. The government responded with sweeping agricultural reforms, most notably the system of price supports. This large-scale intervention, which was unprecedented, continued until the late 1990s when Congress dismantled many of the support programs. By the late 1990s years, farm economy continued its own cycle of ups and downs, booming in the 1996 and 1997, then entering another slump in the subsequent 2 years. But it was a different farm economy that had existed at country start. Early farm policy. During the colonial period of America's history, the British Crown carved land up into huge chunks, which is granted to private companies or individuals. These grantees divided the land further and sold it to others. When independence from England came in 1983, America's founding fathers needed to develop a new system of land distribution. They agreed that all unsettled lands would come under the authority of the federal government, which could sell it for $2.50 an acre. Many people who braved the dangers and hardship of setting these new lands were poor, and they often settled as squatters without clear title to their farms. Through the country's first century, many Americans believed land should be given any for free settlers if they would remain on their property and work it. This was finally accomplished through the Homestead Act of 1862, which opened vast tracts of western land to easy settlement. Another law enacted the same year set aside a portion of federal land to generate income to build what became known as land-grant colleges in the various states. The endowment of public colleges and universities through the Morrill Act led to new opportunities for education and training in the so-called practical arts, including farming. Widespread individual ownership of modest-sized farmers was never the norm in the South as it was in the rest of the United States. Before the Civil War, large plantations of hundreds, if not thousands, of hectares were established for large-scale production of tobacco, rice, and cotton. These farms were tightly controlled by a small amount of wealthy families. Most of the farm workers were slaves. While with the abolition of slavery following the Civil War, many former slaves stayed on the land as tenant farmers called sharecroppers under arrangement with their former owners. Plentiful food supplies for workers in mills, factories, and shops were essential to America's early industrialization. The evolving system of waterways and railroads provided way to ship farm goods long distances. New inventions such as the steel plowshare needed to break through Midwestern soil, the reaper, a machine that harvests grain, the combine, a machine that cuts, threshes, and cleans grain, allowed farms to increase productivity. Many workers in the nation's new mills and factories were sons and daughters of farm families whose labor was no longer needed on the farm as a result of these inventions. By 1960, the nation's 2 million farms produced an abundance of goods. In fact, farm produce made up 82% of country's export in 1960. In a very real sense, agriculture powered America's economic development. As the US farm economy grew, farmers increasingly became aware that government politics affected their livelihoods. The first political advocacy group of farmers, the Grange, was formed in 1967. It spread rapidly, and similar groups such as Farmers Alliance and the Populist Party followed. These groups targeted railroads, merchants, and banks. Railroads for high shipping rates, merchants for fat farmers, considered unscrupulous profit taken as middlemen, and banks for tight credit practice. Political agitation by farmers produced some results. Railroads and grain elevators came under government regulation, and hundreds of cooperatives and banks were formed. However, when farm groups tried to shape the nation's political agenda by backing renowned orator and Democrat William Jennings Bryan for president in 1996, their candidate lost. City dwellers and Eastern business interests viewed the farmers' demand with distrust, fearing that calls for cheap money and easy credit would lead to ruinous inflation. So that was about American agriculture and its changing significance. Thank you everybody for watching. Subscribe, hit the notification button, and also like button.